Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today is part 2 of my predictions for the 2018-19 NBA season. Yesterday, I covered some awards races and went through the entire Western Conference playoff picture, so if you missed that, be sure to check out the card in the top right corner. Today, I'm going to begin with some comeback players to keep an eye on, and then cover the entire Eastern Conference playoff picture and my Eastern Conference and NBA Finals predictions. Let's go ahead and get started. To begin, I have 3 players to keep an eye on that didn't have great seasons last year, but could be in store for bounce-back campaigns this year. Starting off is Utah guard Dante Exum. Fresh off signing a new deal worth $11 million a year this offseason, expectations are high both for him individually as well as for the Jazz as a team. He's had issues staying on the floor since being drafted 5th overall in 2014, and even when he has been on the floor, he hasn't produced the way you would expect a former top 5 pick to. However, he has made incremental strides in certain areas, and performed well in the handful of games he played at the end of last season and in the postseason, before once again being shut down due to injury. However, he did demonstrate increased confidence at times, as well as the kind of defensive versatility that, when combined with his length and size at the guard spot, was what made many people in NBA front offices so excited about him as a prospect in the first place. Improvements in his shooting and playmaking abilities, as well as his offensive feel in general, will be needed to truly make a bigger impact. But if he can stay healthy, and I realize how big of an if that is, he could have a big bounce-back season behind the confidence he built late last year and provide an extra boost to a Jazz team that didn't really add much in the offseason. Next up is Pistons guard Reggie Jackson, who's been pretty inconsistent since he was traded to Detroit in February of 2015. He had a great first full season as a Piston, but has really struggled with injuries since, playing in a combined 97 games the last 2 years. Even when you include that initial success, Jackson hasn't been a very efficient scorer at any point as a Piston, but I have higher expectations under new head coach Dwayne Casey. Say what you want about his struggles as a coach in the playoffs, but those Raptors teams improved under his watch from the time he first got there and had a ton of regular season success, something I expect to continue to see from him with the Pistons. If fully healthy, which is really the biggest part of this entire equation, Jackson should find more easy shots and playmaking opportunities as he becomes more familiar with his place among the Pistons' new big three of himself and Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin. I don't imagine he's going to become an all-star or anything, but statistical improvement in terms of both his scoring and assist averages, as well as increased efficiency, are definitely things that I expect out of Jackson this season. Last up in this category is another guard. This time it's the Hornets' Malik Monk. Last year's 11th overall pick, he was cast away at the end of the bench for most of the year for Charlotte last season, a strange decision on the part of the coaching staff, seeing as how the team wasn't playoff bound anyway. And even when he did get minutes, oftentimes his confidence had taken such a hit that he didn't perform very well. That is, of course, until he was let loose late in the season, a stretch that saw him post a number of impressive performances that have clearly translated to this year. Just watching Hornets preseason games, you can see that swagger and confidence that defined his game in high school and college is back for Monk, and that can only mean good things for fans in Charlotte. For a team that will likely struggle at times to find perimeter offense, especially when Kemba Walker isn't on the floor, Monk's contributions in that category will likely propel his per-game averages well beyond what they were a season ago. Moving on now to my predictions for the Eastern Conference playoff picture. I do want to make a point, just like I did yesterday, that I understand that this is probably the most controversial part of the entire video, and I completely understand that some people are not going to agree with me on these. Starting for the bottom at the 8th seed are the aforementioned Detroit Pistons. I've already expressed my confidence in Dwayne Casey's ability to get this team to perform more up to their capabilities in the regular season, and in my mind, there's no reason for them not to be making the playoffs from a talent perspective. Each of their big 3 members have their own flaws, sure, but as a group, along with guys like Luke Kennard and Reggie Bullock and Ish Smith, they absolutely have what it takes to be a top 8 team in the East. As is seemingly always the case with Detroit, injuries will have a big part to play, even more so now that they're relying on Blake Griffin to be a key piece. But should they be relatively healthy, I like their chances. Next up, the 7th seed is the Washington Wizards. This at first might seem like I have some big issue with the Wizards, and although I'm not all that confident in them as a group, it mostly just comes down to the fact that there are 6 teams in the East that I like better than them. The perimeter trio of Wall and Beal and Porter should once again be a strong group, although likely exactly the same individuals that they were the year before. And the addition of Austin Rivers off the bench should provide a boost to the second unit as well, traditionally one of the biggest flaws of this current era of Wizards basketball. Getting Marcin Gortat away from Wall might be an addition by subtraction situation, and depending on the health of Dwight Howard, he could be just the kind of 5-man this team needs. But in the end, I expect this team to disappoint once again due to a combination of injuries, poor play, and at times poor coaching. Moving on now to the 6th seed, the Miami Heat. If you watched my video on Monday, you'd know that the Heat actually come into this season with the highest payroll in the entire league, so ideally, they'd be placing higher in the playoff picture than this. But as much as people want to argue how weak the East is, that isn't really true when you only consider the top 5 or so teams. So being 6th here isn't really anything to be ashamed of. The thing that really makes me nervous though is Hassan Whiteside, who has all the potential to either once again be a productive and active 5-man, or blow up completely and cause huge harm to the team as a result. But I believe in the solid group of players they have on the roster, along with the chemistry they've built and the culture of the organization, and that should allow them to finish ahead of arguably more talented teams such as the Wizards as a result. Next up is the 5th seed, and like my 5th seed choice of the Jazz out west yesterday, I expect this to be a controversial pick as well, and that is the Indiana Pacers. Again, just like with the Wizards, I don't have an issue with Indiana, I just have 4 teams that I like better. Oladipo looks primed for another big year, and Tyreke Evans and Doug McDermott are good additions to an already solid group from a year ago. Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis are a really good duo in the front court, and rookie Aaron Holiday should be a contributor as well. But there are just more talented teams that I like more. There is no second all-star caliber player on this roster, unlike each of the 4 teams in front of them, and it's just that simple. Moving on now to the 4th seed, the Milwaukee Bucks. As those of you that watched yesterday's video could probably tell, as I was talking about how I expect Giannis Antetokounmpo to be named the league's MVP this coming season, I'm all aboard the Mike Budenholzer hype train as Bucks head coach. They added guys that can space the floor in the front court, such as Brook Lopez and Ersan Ilyasova, and the more modern approach to spacing and ball movement of their new coaching staff should bring with it big improvements in Milwaukee. That, along with a guy who is, in my opinion, a very, very dark horse candidate to become an all-star this year in Chris Middleton, and the Bucks are ready to take the leap into the top 4 in the East this year, in my opinion. Next up, the 3rd seed is the Philadelphia 76ers. This one is also pretty simple. The Sixers did lose a few guys from last season, but added Wilson Chandler in a salary dump move, and Landry Shamet, Markelle Fultz, and Zaire Smith when he returns from injury all look to be positive contributors that they didn't have last season. So as long as everyone stays healthy, the star power of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid should be enough to keep them within the top 3 in the East. And lastly, in the 2nd and 1st seeds, I have the Raptors and Celtics respectively. The 3 big things I see to differentiate the top 2 teams in the East are coaching, the familiarity between teammates, and the biggest X factor of all, health. Nick Nurse was praised for his work retooling the Raptors offense last year, but Brad Stevens is one of, if not the best coaches in the entire league, so the Celtics get the edge there. Not only that, but Boston has had its core group of players together for longer, despite Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving, and Jason Tatum having only been with the team for 1 season, while the Raptors' best player hasn't played in a regular season game with the team yet, and that kind of unfamiliarity can be the difference maker in the standings between 2 teams as talented as these are. And lastly, as I said, the truly unpredictable part, health. Irving and Hayward both obviously struggled with missed games last year, as did Kawhi Leonard. So you never really know what you're going to get out of those guys from an availability standpoint from month to month, which makes health basically a toss-up. But as a result of the first 2 reasons I gave, I'm going to give the Celtics an edge in the regular season standings. Before I move on to the postseason predictions, there are a few teams that I would like to mention to keep an eye on that might be able to sneak into the back part of the playoff picture in the East. First up are my very own Brooklyn Nets. If he can stay healthy, D'Angelo Russell should have a strong season, and they have a really nice supporting cast with guys like Allen Crabbe, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, DeMarre Carroll, and Karis LeVert. But my favorite guy to watch is second-year center Jared Allen, who's an outstanding rim protector and should be much more of a well-known name across the league as the season goes along. I don't expect head coach Kenny Atkinson to have this team in the playoffs just yet, but they are worth mentioning. Next is the Charlotte Hornets. I've already discussed my opinion on second-year guard Malik Monk, and I also like how rookie Miles Bridges has looked so far. Even though I hate how expensive their roster is, the Hornets do have some solid players. Kemba Walker is obviously the only all-star caliber guy, but if Nick Batum can stay healthy, he should have a bounce-back year. Add in the contributions of Marvin Williams, Tony Parker, Cody Zeller, and the younger guys I already mentioned, and they could make it interesting by season's end. Lastly, I do think the Cleveland Cavaliers are worth mentioning here. Again, I don't expect them to make the playoffs, but I wouldn't be shocked if they did. Colin Sexton should be a strong contributor as a rookie, and this is still a team with playoff-tested guys like Kevin Love, Tristan Thompson, George Hill, and J.R. Smith, along with some youth like Larry Nance Jr., Jetty Osmond, and Jordan Clarkson. Add in the shooting of Kyle Korver, and if you squint a little bit, you can start to see a solid roster form in Cleveland, even without LeBron James around. Moving on now to the Eastern Conference Finals matchup, and as you can probably tell by the prior playoff picture section, I have the Celtics facing the Raptors, with Boston advancing to the NBA Finals for many of the same reasons I already mentioned. And finally, in the NBA Finals, as much as I would love to make a bold prediction, that the Celtics will bring down Golden State. I just don't see it happening. Warriors in 6. And there you have it, between yesterday and today's video, my entire 2018-19 NBA season predictions. I hope you all enjoyed it. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.